Hey, party people. Welcome to the second episode of Stump Zoe. Someone asked if I could teach them how to render the galaxy. They call it the galaxy dress from the Robert Wun collection. I don't know if he calls it that, but this is a kind of a galaxy print, and what I'm about to show you, I guess you could apply to other galaxy prints. But listen. This video could end up being super embarrassing for me because technically, logistically, I know how to, it's like wet on wet, let them blend, sheer sepia thing, and then the sparkle. Like, technically, I know how to do it. Now, will I be able to execute it really beautifully? I don't know. I don't know. Let's start. Let's start by laying down some water. So wet on wet technique is how you can have different colors kind of blending into each other without harsh edges, because you're laying down a layer of water first, and so all the colors are going to kind of bleed into each other. And the more water you add, the lighter the colors are going to be, the more things are going to bleed into one another. I don't want to put in a lot of water, okay? But you want to keep your water inside the lines of the pencil. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean you want it to go everywhere, because everywhere you lay down water is where you are going to have paint go, travel, drift. And listen, I drew two of these just in case one of these turns out terrible and I need to start over again from scratch. Just tilt your head. You can see the shine of the paper, even if you can't see it on the screen. And I'm going to start with this purple situation in here. And with a clean, damp brush, kind of soften those edges. And with a wet brush, soften them a little more. This is very sepia brown. Looks very brown at the very bottom. So we're going to put in that dark sepia brown. I know normally I paint with round shape brushes, watercolor brushes, but this is a filbert where it's flat, but it's got a rounded shape. And I bought this years ago. I'm going to add just a little bit more water, move things around. I bought this years ago in Poland. This is a German brand, Colibri, or I don't know what the brand is, but it's made in Germany. The brush is made in Germany. And I bought it in Poland when I was there with my family for a vacation. And I started using this a lot in my Color Theory for Fashion Patreon class. And I just started really loving using it. And so now it's kind of my favorite brush to use. Okay. So I've still got some brown in here, but it's a lot more watery. And I'm going to kind of move this in. Okay. Move some more of the sepia up. Okay. And then I'm going to move this violet down. And just let that blur into each other a little. Okay. And then I want this rosier, redder violet. Always have a scrap. Okay. I like the color, but it's too watery, so we're gonna Ooh, that's not watery enough. And it's still damp up here. You know, it's not totally dry yet. We're gonna kind of blend that in. And kind of smudge that line. And then I want to soften this edge. And all of this is easier to do when the paper is already damp. So even if the water is drying a little bit, you know, it's still damp. So you're still able to smudge and soften a lot more than if it wasn't. So we're going to blend that all up in there. Okay. And then, okay. And then we have this splotch. See, I love this brush because I have the skinny point, but then I have the broad strokes. And I'm just twisting the brush around to however I need to use it. So I got the background color, and then later we're gonna add these white. So don't worry about that so much. Okay, so we are gonna add some white in here, and we are gonna add some orange in here. But we wanna add that once this is dry, because you don't want it to start getting muddy. You wanna start layering, okay? Which is why I like to use opaque gouache better than watercolor for fashion illustration, so that I can layer opaque things on top of darker things later on. It's like the best of both worlds in terms of watercolor and oil painting. With oil painting, you can, like, because it's opaque, you can layer on the highlights on top. With watercolor, you tend to build up from light to dark. But with gouache, you can kind of go back and forth. Okay. Now, I want to wait for this to dry. This is like a sheer, like, beaded chiffon headpiece. And I was looking at this earlier and I was like, okay, I know these are gloves because there's obvious seams, okay? It's the same seams on either side, but I don't see a wrist. And then these can't be glued to the skin. They're gloves. They're gloves. So anytime you render a sheer, okay, you want to render kind of what's underneath it. Wait for that to dry completely. And this is whether you're doing it in paint or marker, and then layer your sheer on top. So let's paint these gloves while we wait for this part to dry. And then I want to take some water and fade that up a little bit. If you ever want to pick up color, you just dry out your brush and just pull up the liquid as much as possible. I do want to put in the blue nails because they're very prominent in the picture. And we're still waiting for things to dry before we can move on to the next step. So we're doing other things. This is one of those things where I always talk about how with color pencil, it's so slow because you have to work so hard at blending and it takes a long time. And listen, some people really are into that stuff. You do you, but it's slow. And a lot of fashion illustration is fast. And so watercolor, even though you have to wait for things to dry, it's still faster than colored pencil because you're bouncing around doing other things. Okay. And I'm putting that little orange backdrop in there to put some more like sparkly bits. And then I'm going to put in some white. Soften those edges with a wet brush. Okay, so this part is dry, so we're doing this sheer piece now. And it is that same sepia color that you see in the gloves, in the bottom of the dress, but sheer. So we're going to take this same sepia color and just water it out a lot. Just like this little spot of glove. I'm going to add some shadows to the gloves while we're waiting for that top coat to dry. Okay, I just really have to stop fussing in this section and just call it a loss. The next step is to scatter 100 million sparkles across this whole thing. And if you think I'm going to sit here and just, no, literally nobody has time for that. Okay. So that's not my life, but you do you. Okay. If you have watched my tweed rendering tutorial, you know where I'm going with this. And where I'm going with this is this. We're going to take a toothbrush and we're going to spray paint splatters across. Okay. Now, have you ever seen those cooking videos where the chef is like, if you want to salt the whole dish, you have to salt from on high so the salt sprinkles everywhere. And if you want to salt just your own little tiny piece of chicken, you salt low so that it's targeting, your sprinkles are targeting your one piece of chicken. And you're going to do the same thing is you're going to dip your toothbrush into the paint. And sometimes it takes a second or two to adjust the consistency you want to get the splatters that you want. And you're going to spray. There's a few colors going on, but the general look is a lot of white. There's some gold. We have some blue, okay, but a lot of white. Before you spray a lot of colors, you want to mask off your illustration because you don't want to spray colors everywhere. You just want it on your figure. Okay, good enough. Yeah, I think that's good. And I want some gold ones because these are really like, they read more gold than the rest of the piece. Oh my God. Now, if you look, there's a lot of speckles in there that are of the bigger size. There are some bigger gems in here, red, green, violet, and we're going to put them in. And you have a couple of options. You can use paint pens, okay, which I think is a great option. I have some Uniposcas. I have some Pilot Pintors. Okay, here's red. Another thing you can do is use watercolor pencils. You know, if you use color pencils, here's a color pencil, and you just tap, you don't get a lot of payout. You know, you can sit there and do this sort of thing. Again, too much effort, not enough payout. But if you take a wet watercolor pencil and you just let the water soak a little bit, Derwent Inktense to me are the most pigmented brand that I've seen so far. And you see how little effort for huge color payout. So you can take, oh, I need more water now. You can take a wet, barely wet watercolor pencil and stab your paper. Whoa. I also have a white one, which is a lot fatter than a gel pen. So if you want these big old white sparkles. Shouldn't have sprayed so much right there. There's like this little empty spot. There's definitely some blue sparkles on the gloves. All right. Is this the best rendering I've ever done? Absolutely not. But do you get the gist of how I did it and the steps and the techniques that I used to create your own version? I hope so. If you do a rendering of this gown, please tag me at Zoe Hong and share with me how you've applied the splattering and the wet on wet technique to create this look. Please give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today. Share, subscribe, all the ways you show me love, and I will see you in the next video.